Soft ambient music begins, setting a somber tone as the narration starts. On a crisp autumn morning in 2023, the quiet town of Maple Hollow, Michigan, awoke to news that would ripple through its community like a shockwave. An arrest had been made in a case long thought cold, a mystery that haunted its residents for nearly 2 decades. But to understand the gravity of this moment, we must journey back to a time when life seemed simpler, a time before a young woman named Emily Carter vanished without a trace. Emily Carter was the heart of Maple Hollow. Known for her infectious laughter and a smile that could light up the darkest room, she was the kind of person who made everyone feel like a lifelong friend. At 24, she was a cherished daughter, a beloved sister, and a spirited kindergarten teacher at the local elementary school. Her passion for teaching and her love for children were evident in the way she transformed her classroom into a world of wonder and imagination. In the fall of 2004, the leaves painted the town in hues of gold and crimson. It was Emily's favorite time of year, a season she often celebrated with her family and friends. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, an unthinkable tragedy unfolded. It was a Friday, October 15th, when Emily's presence was last confirmed. She had spent the evening with her close friends, enjoying dinner at a local cafe. The laughter and warmth of the gathering lingered in the air as she said her goodbyes and headed home. Her house, a quaint 2-story nestled at the end of Sycamore Street, was just a short drive away. But Emily never made it home that night. The following morning, the sun rose over Maple Hollow, but Emily remained absent. It was unusual, unsettling. Her family, accustomed to her punctual morning calls, grew anxious when the phone stayed silent. By afternoon, the worry festered into dread. Calls to her cell phone went unanswered, and a drive past her house revealed her car still parked in the driveway, untouched since the previous night. The vibrant energy that Emily carried with her seemed to have dissipated into the ether. Her family, gripped by an escalating fear, contacted the police. The initial response, however, was a blend of skepticism and procedural calm. Adults, after all, sometimes choose to disappear for a while. But Emily was not just any adult. She was a beacon in her community, and her sudden vanishing was as peculiar as it was alarming. As the hours ticked by, darkness enveloped the town once more. It was then, in the stillness of the night, that a 911 call shattered the silence. A call that would mark the beginning of a journey through uncertainty, heartbreak, and ultimately, a shocking revelation that no one in Maple Hollow could have ever anticipated. Music swells, creating an atmosphere of tension and mystery as Part 1 concludes. The 911 operator's voice was calm, practiced, yet tinged with concern as she listened to the frantic words pouring through the receiver. Emily's sister, Sarah, was on the line, her voice trembling, a mixture of fear and determination. She described Emily's disappearance, her unwavering reliability, and the eerie silence that now filled their lives. As the dispatcher assured Sarah that officers would be sent to investigate, the wheels of the initial response slowly began to turn. 2 patrol cars arrived on Sycamore Street, their blue and red lights casting fleeting shadows on the pavement. Officers Daniels and Carter, both seasoned but weary from years of small-town cases, stepped out, their breath visible in the crisp autumn air. They were greeted by Emily's parents, their faces drawn and pale. In the living room, family photos filled the walls, each frame a testament to a life brimming with joy and connection. It was a haunting contrast to the reality they faced now. The officers listened as Sarah recounted the events of the previous night. She spoke of Emily's routine, her unwavering punctuality, and the unsettling quiet that had replaced her usual morning phone call. As Sarah detailed the timeline, Officer Daniels took notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Despite the urgency in Sarah's voice, the officers maintained a procedural composure. They asked about Emily's friends, her work, her relationships, searching for any hint of discord or reason for voluntary disappearance. It was standard protocol, yet beneath their methodical approach lingered a growing awareness that this was no ordinary missing persons case. However, in those crucial first 48 hours, critical missteps began to surface. The officers, bound by procedure, labeled Emily as a possible voluntary missing adult, a designation that delayed the issuance of an Amber Alert or wider search efforts. It was a decision that would haunt the investigation for years to come. Meanwhile, Sarah took matters into her own hands, reaching out to Emily's friends, hoping against hope that someone had seen or heard from her. Her best friend, Josh, a tech-savvy college student, offered to help track Emily's cell phone using an app they had both installed. His determination mirrored Sarah's desperation. Back at the station, the police began canvassing the area, speaking with neighbors who recalled nothing unusual from that night. A lone streetlight flickered on Sycamore Street, as if echoing the uncertainty that loomed over the investigation. As night fell again over Maple Hollow, tension rippled through the community. Conversations at the local diner, once filled with mundane chatter, turned to speculation and fear. Emily's disappearance was now a dark cloud hanging over the town, casting long shadows in the minds of its residents. In a small conference room at the police department, a map of Maple Hollow was pinned to the wall, dotted with red markers indicating places Emily was last seen. The officers, now joined by a detective from the county, pored over the scant evidence. The urgency in the air was palpable, yet so too was the frustration at the lack of clear leads. Outside, Sarah stood in the cold, her breath forming small clouds in the night air. She clutched her phone, willing it to ring with some news. Any news. Her mind raced with questions, each more terrifying than the last. Where was Emily? Why had she vanished without a trace? And most haunting of all, who could be responsible? As the clock ticked towards midnight, the town of Maple Hollow held its breath, unaware of the dark secrets hidden just beneath the surface, secrets that would soon unravel, turning their world upside down. Music swells, creating an atmosphere of tension and mystery, as Part 2 concludes. The clock struck midnight, marking the beginning of the second day since Emily vanished. Inside the dimly lit police station, Detective Harris leaned over the cluttered table, his eyes tracing the red markers on the map. He tapped his pen rhythmically, a habit that betrayed his growing unease. Across from him, Officer Lane sifted through a pile of statements gathered from neighbors. Lane's voice broke the tense silence. "We should have asked more about the vehicles on Sycamore Street. There might be something there." Harris nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Let's revisit those witnesses first thing in the morning. Something's got to give." Meanwhile, in Sarah's living room, a small group had gathered, family, friends, and a few concerned neighbors. The room was filled with a mix of hushed whispers and the soft hum of the television, which played the local news on a loop, Emily's picture flashing repeatedly on the screen. Faces were drawn with worry, eyes fixed intently on the news anchor, as if willing her to provide answers. Sarah sat on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting a tissue. She looked at Josh, who was hunched over his laptop. "Any luck with the app?" Josh shook his head, frustration etched across his face. "It's like her phone just disappeared. No signal, nothing." The reality of Emily's absence settled heavily over the room, each passing minute amplifying the fear gnawing at their hearts. Her father, James, paced near the window, his jaw clenched, eyes scanning the darkness outside as if expecting Emily to walk up the driveway at any moment. Back at the police station, the first rays of dawn found Detective Harris and Officer Lane at Sycamore Street, knocking on doors once more. A tired-looking woman answered at one house, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Sorry to bother you again, ma'am," Harris began, his tone gentle yet probing. "Did you notice any unfamiliar cars parked nearby the night Emily disappeared?" The woman hesitated, her brow furrowing in concentration. "I did see a dark SUV parked across the street. Didn't think much of it at the time, but now—" Harris exchanged a glance with Lane. This could be the lead they desperately needed. "Thank you. If you remember anything else, even the smallest detail, please call us." As they drove back to the station, Lane voiced the question weighing on both their minds. Why would someone take Emily? And why now, of all times? Harris stared out the window, lost in thought. "That's what we need to find out. But we can't afford another mistake. Not now." The air in Maple Hollow was thick with tension as word of the dark SUV spread through the community. Speculation grew more rampant, each theory more outlandish than the last. But in the midst of the fear, a small glimmer of hope began to form. The SUV was a lead, and for the first time since Emily's disappearance, the investigation had a direction. As Part 3 draws to a close, questions linger. What secrets does the SUV hold? Who was behind the wheel that fateful night? And most pressing of all, will they find Emily before it's too late? The answers, hidden in plain sight, are poised to shatter the fragile peace of Maple Hollow. Music builds, carrying the suspense into the next chapter. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across Maple Hollow, the police station buzzed with a renewed sense of urgency. Detective Harris and Officer Lane gathered with their team in the cramped briefing room, a map of the town spread across the table, pins marking reported sightings and leads. Harris spoke first, his voice steady, though tinged with the weight of responsibility. "We have a potential lead with the dark SUV seen on Sycamore Street the night Emily vanished. We need to track down every vehicle matching that description registered in the area." Officer Lane nodded, scribbling notes furiously. "I'll start cross-referencing with DMV records. We should also check any traffic cameras on the main roads leading out of town." As the team dispersed to follow their assignments, Harris lingered, staring at the map as if willing it to reveal its secrets. The first 48 hours were critical, and the clock was ticking relentlessly. Meanwhile, at the Patterson household, Emily's parents sat in their living room, surrounded by concerned neighbors and family. The air was thick with a mix of hope and dread. Emily's mother clutched a framed photograph of her daughter, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights and tears. Aunt Margaret, her voice a steady anchor in the storm of emotions, tried to offer comfort. "Emily's strong, she'll come back to us, you'll see." But beneath the surface, doubt gnawed at the edges of their resolve. The community was rallying, organizing search parties and distributing flyers, but whispers of what could have happened to Emily spread like wildfire, each theory more unsettling than the last. Back at the station, Officer Lane's rapid typing filled the silence as she scoured databases, her focus unyielding. Suddenly she paused, her eyes narrowing at the screen. "Harris, you might want to take a look at this." Harris leaned over her shoulder, his heart quickening as he scanned the information. A dark SUV, registered to a name that rang a bell, someone known to frequent the local bar where Emily was last seen. "This might be our guy," Harris murmured, a mix of hope and caution in his voice. "We need to bring him in for questioning." As the day wore on, the investigation hit its first snag. A procedural error, misfiled paperwork from an earlier case, delayed the warrant needed to search the suspect's vehicle. Precious hours slipped away, frustration mounting among the officers. In the town square, candles flickered in the evening breeze as a vigil began to form. The community, bound together by shared anxiety, prayed for Emily's safe return. Yet, amidst the flickering lights, shadows loomed, hinting at truths yet uncovered. Detective Harris, standing at the edge of the gathering, felt the weight of the town's gaze upon him. He knew they were counting on him to solve this, to bring Emily home. But as the first day waned into night, doubts crept in, whispering of what might have been missed. The dark SUV, the suspect whose face now haunted his thoughts, pieces of a puzzle not yet fitting together. The urgency was palpable, every second bringing them closer to either a breakthrough or an irreversible loss. As the vigil candles burned low, Harris resolved to push harder, dig deeper. The darkness held secrets, and he was determined to uncover them before it was too late, before the trail went cold. The next morning promised new revelations, but whether they would lead to answers or more questions remained to be seen. For now, the town of Maple Hollow held its breath, poised on the brink of discovery or despair. The morning light crept over Maple Hollow, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Detective Harris sat at his desk, his mind racing with the events of the previous day. The dark SUV was a promising lead, yet the procedural error had stalled their momentum, and with each passing hour, the trail grew colder. Rumors began to swirl in the tight-knit community. Whispers of old rivalries, grudges, and suspicious behavior filled the air. At the local diner, patrons exchanged knowing glances, their conversations dropping to hushed tones as they speculated who among them could be involved. The name on everyone's lips was Martin Sheffield, a local handyman with a reputation for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Martin had been seen near the bar on the night Emily disappeared. His dark SUV, a battered relic of better days, matched the description given by more than one witness. But Martin was also known for his frequent lapses in judgment, often drinking himself into oblivion, making it difficult to ascertain whether he was capable of something more sinister. Detective Harris knew they had to tread carefully. Martin's alibi was shaky at best, a tangled web of half-truths and vague recollections. Yet without concrete evidence, Harris couldn't shake the feeling that they were grasping at straws. As the days turned into weeks, the initial fervor of the investigation began to wane. The townspeople grew restless, their hope dimming with each passing day without resolution. The media, once eager for any scrap of information, slowly turned their attention elsewhere, leaving the community to grapple with their fears and suspicions. Harris felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The pressure to find answers, to bring closure to Emily's family, was relentless. Yet every avenue they pursued seemed to lead to a dead end. The investigation hit a wall, a seemingly impenetrable barrier that left them questioning every step they had taken. One afternoon, as Harris flipped through the case files for the umpteenth time, a familiar voice cut through his thoughts. It was Officer Jenkins, a young recruit with a keen eye for detail. "Sir, I was going through the surveillance footage again," Jenkins began hesitantly. "I noticed something odd. There's a gap, about 10 minutes worth of footage missing from one of the cameras outside the bar." Harris straightened, his interest piqued. Could be nothing, he mused, but also could be everything. The missing footage added another layer of complexity to the case. Who would have tampered with it and why? And more importantly, what had it captured that someone didn't want them to see? The lead was tenuous, but it was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise stagnant investigation. Harris knew they had to pursue it, to leave no stone unturned. But as they dug deeper into the mystery, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone out there knew more than they were letting on. The investigation was at a crossroads. They could either push forward into the unknown, risking further dead ends, or retreat and risk the case going cold altogether. For Harris, the choice was clear. He would continue to fight, to seek the truth, even if it meant uncovering a reality more unsettling than he could have ever imagined. The town of Maple Hollow remained on edge, waiting for the day when the shadows would finally give way to light. But for now, the suspense lingered, a silent testament to the secrets yet to be revealed. The town of Maple Hollow was buzzing with theories, each more speculative than the last. In diners and on front porches, whispers of conspiracy and suspicion filled the air. Harris, aware of the mounting pressure, knew that the missing footage could be the key to unlocking the mystery, but he also knew it was far from a concrete lead. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation began to stall. The missing footage was traced back to a technical glitch, or so the experts claimed, leaving Harris and his team with more questions than answers. Yet in the absence of solid evidence, the rumors only grew louder. A local mechanic with a checkered past found himself at the center of the town's gossip. His name was Carl, a man known for his temper and late-night escapades. He had been seen at the bar the night Emily disappeared, and although his alibi checked out, the townspeople were not so easily convinced. Harris interviewed Carl, who was defensive but cooperative. "I didn't even know her," Carl insisted. "I was just there for a drink." People see what they want to see. Despite Carl's protests, the town had made up its mind. It was easier to point fingers at the familiar face of Carl than to grapple with the unknown. But Harris, guided by his instincts, refused to focus solely on Carl. He needed more than circumstantial evidence. He needed the truth. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking. Each passing day without progress weighed heavily on the case. Emily's family, desperate for closure, grew more vocal, their pleas echoing through the local media. The public's demand for answers was relentless, and Harris felt the weight of their expectations like a leaden cloak. In the quiet moments, Harris would find himself replaying the night of Emily's disappearance over and over, searching for the missing piece, the overlooked detail that would shatter the wall of silence surrounding the case. But each time, he came up empty. The investigation, once fueled by hope and determination, was now mired in frustration and doubt. It seemed that every path they took led to a dead end. Every new lead fizzled out before it even began. As winter settled over Maple Hollow, the case grew cold, the chilling reality setting in. Harris knew that without new evidence, without a breakthrough, Emily's case would remain unsolved. Another tragic story lost to time. But in the darkest hours, just when hope seemed all but gone, an unexpected visitor arrived at the station. A woman, eyes filled with a determined glint, asked to speak with Harris. Her name was Lorraine, a childhood friend of Emily's, and she claimed to have information that could change everything. Harris listened intently, his heart racing as Lorraine spoke. Her story was both shocking and heartbreaking, a revelation that threatened to upend everything they thought they knew. But could it be trusted? As Lorraine finished, Harris knew he had to act quickly. This was the first real lead in weeks, a fragile lifeline that could pull the investigation back from the brink of obscurity. The truth, it seemed, was closer than any of them had imagined. But as Harris prepared to follow this new thread, a lingering question haunted him. Was this the break they needed, or just another mirage in the relentless desert of uncertainty? Harris leaned back in his chair, the weight of Lorraine's words pressing heavily on his mind. Her account of the night Emily vanished was filled with details that both intrigued and confused him. According to Lorraine, Emily had been seen arguing with a man at the local diner just hours before she disappeared. The description was vague, but Lorraine was certain of one thing. The man was not from Maple Hollow. As Harris pieced together this new information, he couldn't help but recall the rumors that had been swirling through the town ever since Emily's disappearance. Whispers of a shadowy figure, a stranger seen lurking near the outskirts, had been dismissed early on, overshadowed by more concrete leads. But now, with Lorraine's testimony, those rumors took on a new significance. The investigation team was quick to act on this fresh lead. They scoured surveillance footage from businesses near the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily's mysterious companion. But once again, the trail went cold. The footage was either too grainy or missing entirely. A frustrating reminder of how technology had failed them in those crucial moments. With no visual confirmation, Harris knew they had to rely on more traditional methods. Interviews with diner staff and patrons revealed little, each recollection more unreliable than the last. The man, it seemed, had vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving no trace behind. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure from the community mounted. Speculation ran rampant, and fingers began to point in every direction. A former classmate of Emily's, known for his troubled past, became the center of the town's suspicions. His frequent brushes with the law and volatile temper made him an easy target, and the police were compelled to bring him in for questioning. Sitting across from Harris in the interrogation room, the young man maintained his innocence. His alibi, though shaky, placed him miles away from the diner on the night in question. Yet the town's thirst for a resolution was relentless, and the media fanned the flames of public opinion. Headlines screamed accusations, turning the young man's life into a spectacle of guilt by association. Despite the mounting pressure to make an arrest, Harris remained unconvinced. Something about Lorraine's story gnawed at him, a piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. He knew that pursuing the wrong lead could mean losing valuable time that Emily's family didn't have. As winter's grip tightened on Maple Hollow, hope flickered like a candle in the wind. The investigation, once so full of promise, seemed to be slipping into the abyss of unsolved mysteries. But Harris was not ready to give up. He knew that somewhere, buried beneath the layers of misinformation and fear, lay the truth, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The question that lingered, haunting his every move, was simple yet profound. Would the truth reveal itself before the case was lost forever to the annals of forgotten tragedies? The chill of winter eventually gave way to the tentative warmth of spring, but for the Mason family, the seasons brought no reprieve. Emily's absence was an open wound, a constant reminder of the life that once filled their home with laughter and dreams. As the investigation stalled, the town moved on, its curiosity dulled by the passage of time and the allure of new distractions. But for the Masons, there was no moving on. They clung to the hope that Emily would be found, pouring their grief into a private investigation. Desperation fueled their every move, driving them to follow every whisper, no matter how faint. They hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Frank Mulligan, whose reputation for dogged determination offered a glimmer of hope. Mulligan was relentless, combing through the case files with a fresh perspective. He retraced Emily's last known steps, interviewed anyone who might have known her, and reviewed every piece of evidence the police had collected. Yet, like Harris, he found himself stymied by the same dead ends and fading memories. The years dragged on, each one marked by another anniversary of Emily's disappearance. The Masons held vigils, their small gatherings a solemn testament to their unwavering hope. The town's interest waned, but the Masons' resolve never faltered, even as their world grew smaller and the whispers of "move on" grew louder. Inside the walls of their home, the Masons kept Emily's room as it was, a sanctuary frozen in time. Her posters still clung to the walls, her bed neatly made, awaiting her return. It was their shrine, a place where they could feel her presence and imagine her safe return. Mulligan, too, refused to let go. He continued his search, quietly working amidst the shadows of Maple Hollow. He delved into the town's underbelly, seeking connections others might have overlooked. His persistence was fueled by a promise he had made to the Masons, to find their daughter, no matter how long it took. But as the years slipped by, hope began to feel like a cruel joke. The news of another unsolved case in a neighboring town was a bitter reminder of how quickly the world could forget. The Masons' faith was tested time and again, yet they held on to it with a ferocity that defied the odds. For them, Emily was not a statistic, not a story to be buried beneath layers of dust. The silence was suffocating, a heavy blanket that threatened to smother their resolve. Yet in the quiet moments when the world slept and memories crept in, the Masons felt Emily's presence. It was as if she was whispering to them, urging them not to give up. As the decade came to a close, Maple Hollow had all but forgotten the mystery that once gripped it so fiercely. New families had moved in, unaware of the shadows that lurked in the town's history. But for those who remembered, the question lingered like an uninvited guest. What really happened to Emily Mason? And then, as if summoned by the sheer will of the Masons' love and Mulligan's tireless efforts, a breakthrough emerged. A small-town rumor, dismissed years earlier as idle gossip, resurfaced with a new and unsettling twist. It was the kind of detail that, while seemingly insignificant, had the potential to unravel the entire case. The question now was whether this new lead would finally illuminate the truth or fade into the silence that had haunted the Masons for so long. The years stretched on like an endless road, with each passing season bringing the Masons a new shade of heartache. The once vibrant home, filled with Emily's laughter, became a museum of memories, where every corner seemed to hold a whisper of the past. In the quiet hours, when the world outside their windows fell into a peaceful slumber, the Masons found solace in their unyielding bond, their shared grief forging an unspoken promise to never let Emily's story fade. The town of Maple Hollow, meanwhile, moved on with a resilience that seemed both admirable and cruel. Life continued, children grew up, businesses thrived, and seasons changed. The whispers of Emily Mason's disappearance, once the talk of every gathering, became a ghost story told around campfires, an eerie tale of what once was. Newcomers filled the streets, blissfully ignorant of the heartache that lingered beneath the town's picturesque facade, yet not everyone could turn the page so easily. Detective Mulligan, now retired but ever restless, found himself drawn back to the case with an intensity that defied explanation. Every lead, every tip, and every rumor was meticulously catalogued, in the hope that one day the pieces would form a complete picture. It was during one of these late-night sessions, surrounded by the dusty stacks of old case files, that Mulligan came across a report he'd nearly forgotten. A whisper, a rumor, dismissed as idle gossip years ago, now seemed to pulse with a new life. It told of a man, a drifter, who had passed through Maple Hollow around the time of Emily's disappearance. The details were vague, the kind that might easily slip through the cracks of a bustling investigation, but what caught Mulligan's attention was the mention of a distinctive tattoo, one that matched recent reports from an unsolved case in a neighboring town. The rumor, once dismissed, now carried the weight of possibility. Mulligan knew it was a fragile lead, one that could shatter under the scrutiny of reality, but the echoes of Emily's case urged him forward. He reached out to the Masons, sharing the development with a cautionary optimism, knowing full well the emotional toll such news could bring. For the Masons, this was a lifeline thrown into their sea of despair. They had spent years conducting their own quiet investigation, piecing together scraps of information, clinging to any shred of hope. The idea that someone, somewhere, might hold the key to Emily's fate reignited their resolve. They found themselves once more at the center of a story they had never wanted to be a part of, their lives a testament to the enduring power of love and hope. As Mulligan and the Masons delved deeper into the lead, the fabric of Maple Hollow's past began to unravel. The town, now forced to confront the shadows it had long ignored, buzzed with a renewed, albeit uneasy, interest. Old stories resurfaced, connections once deemed irrelevant were re-examined, and a palpable tension gripped the community. The question that hung in the air, however, was whether this new lead would finally pierce the veil of silence that had long cloaked Emily's disappearance. Would it bring answers to a family that had spent the better part of their lives searching, or would it dissolve into yet another dead end, leaving the Masons with only the hollow comfort of what might have been? With hope rekindled, the investigation pressed forward, each day a step closer to the truth, yet fraught with the possibility of heartbreak. As the Masons braced for what lay ahead, they held on to each other, their determination unwavering in the face of uncertainty. The story of Emily Mason was not yet over, and the echoes of the past were finally beginning to find their voice. The years following Emily Mason's disappearance had been a relentless march of time, each day stretching into the next with the same unanswered questions. In Maple Hollow, the seasons changed and children grew older, but the mystery of Emily lingered like a stubborn shadow. For the Masons, life had become a routine of remembrance and quiet investigation. Every anniversary of Emily's disappearance was marked with candlelight vigils and silent tears, their home a shrine to a daughter who had vanished without a trace. They clung to the belief that she was out there somewhere, alive and waiting to be found. This hope, though sometimes fragile, was the only thing that kept them moving forward. In the early years, the family had hired private investigators, scoured the internet for clues, even traveled to towns where sightings had been reported, only to return with empty hands and heavier hearts. Each lead that fizzled out was a small death, a reminder of their helplessness against the vast unknown. They learned to brace themselves for disappointment, but never let it extinguish their resolve. The community of Maple Hollow, once galvanized by Emily's story, had begun to move on. New businesses opened, high school teams won championships, and the rhythms of small-town life resumed their steady beat. But beneath the surface, there was an unspoken agreement to keep Emily's memory alive. Her face, immortalized in faded posters, watched over the town from bulletin boards and shop windows. Yet, as the years stretched into a decade, talk of Emily became less frequent, slipping into the realm of hushed whispers and somber nods. The new generation of residents knew of her only as a tragic story from the past, a cautionary tale told by parents who remembered when the streets felt a little less safe. For the Masons, the silence was a suffocating presence. It was as if the world had moved on, leaving them trapped in a moment they could never escape. But they refused to accept this as the end. They continued their quiet campaign for answers, organizing yearly fundraisers to keep Emily's case alive in the public eye and in the minds of the authorities. Their persistence did not go unnoticed. Detective Mulligan, though retired, had never fully let go of Emily's case. In the quiet hours of the night, he would sift through old files, seeking patterns in the chaos. It was during one of these solitary sessions that he noticed something, a small inconsistency in a witness statement, a detail so minute it had been overlooked during the initial investigation. Mulligan, now armed with this new perspective, reached out to the Masons, reigniting the flame of hope that had been smoldering in their hearts. This renewed focus on Emily's case began to stir things up in Maple Hollow once more. Conversations that had long been buried were brought back to light. Old secrets whispered again as the town faced the possibility that someone among them knew more than they had ever let on. The Masons, buoyed by this unexpected momentum, found themselves at the heart of a reinvigorated investigation. They were no longer alone in their quest for answers. The community, once silent, was beginning to engage with the past in a meaningful way. Yet as the investigation gained traction, the question loomed larger than ever. Would this renewed effort finally break the silence, or would the Masons be left to navigate their grief in solitude once more? As they prepared to confront whatever truths lay ahead, the weight of the years pressed down on them, but so too did the unwavering hope that Emily's story was not yet finished. The years following Emily's disappearance had not been kind to the Masons. Each passing season marked another cycle of hope and despair. Despite their tireless efforts to keep Emily's name alive, the world around them seemed to move on. Maple Hollow, A town once buzzing with rumors and speculation gradually returned to its quiet, insular existence. Emily's case, once a topic of front-page headlines, had been relegated to the dusty archives of the local newspaper, a haunting reminder of unresolved pain. Yet for the Masons, time was an enemy they refused to succumb to. They clung to every shred of evidence, every whispered lead, becoming amateur detectives in their own right. John Mason spent countless hours in their makeshift home office, poring over maps and documents, trying to piece together the fragments of a puzzle that had eluded even the best detectives. Martha Mason, on the other hand, had become the face of their crusade for answers. Her presence at town meetings and local events was a constant reminder of the unsolved mystery that had cast a shadow over their community. She spoke with anyone who would listen, hoping that one day someone would recall a crucial detail that could shift the course of the investigation. Despite the Masons' relentless pursuit, the community's initial fervor had faded. New families moved into town, unaware of the tragedy that had once gripped Maple Hollow. Life continued. Children grew up, and the memory of Emily became a ghost story told to caution kids about the dangers of trusting too easily. In the quiet corners of the town, however, Detective Mulligan's discovery began to ripple through the consciousness of those who had been there at the beginning. The inconsistency he uncovered, though small, hinted at a possibility that had been overlooked. A suspect, once dismissed, who might have been closer to the truth than anyone imagined. As Mulligan shared his findings with the Masons, their determination reignited. They reached out to old acquaintances, rekindling connections with those who had once been pivotal in the investigation. The town, though resistant, began to murmur with a renewed sense of curiosity and unease. At a local diner, conversations shifted from mundane gossip to the resurfacing of old suspicions. People began to wonder aloud who among them might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. In whispered tones, names were mentioned, old alibis questioned, and friendships tested under the strain of renewed scrutiny. But even as the town began to stir, the Masons knew the road ahead was fraught with challenges. They were up against not just the passage of time, but the deeply ingrained reluctance of a community that feared the truths buried in its past. The question loomed larger than ever. Could they break through the silence that had shrouded Emily's case for so long, or would they be left to confront the shadows alone? As the Masons prepared for the next steps in their quest, a new lead emerged, one that promised to shed light on the very night Emily vanished. It was a glimmer of hope, yet it came with a price, a truth that could unravel the fabric of the town itself. Would they dare to pursue it, knowing the potential cost? With their resolve stronger than ever, the Masons braced themselves for what lay ahead, knowing that this time there was no turning back. The silence of the years had been broken, and the secrets of Maple Hollow were on the brink of being exposed. In the dim glow of the kitchen light, the Masons gathered around the table, their faces etched with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The new lead, so tantalizingly close, felt like a lifeline after years adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Yet, as they pored over the scant details, they understood the gravity of what was at stake. This was not just about finding Emily's killer. It was about unearthing a truth that had long been buried, one that could fracture the very foundations of their community. Across town, in a cluttered office filled with old case files and fading memories, Detective Sarah Calloway sat at her desk, her eyes scanning the latest report. Having recently transferred from Detroit, Sarah was known for her tenacity and her innovative approach to cold cases. She was exactly the kind of fresh perspective the Masons had hoped for, a detective with no ties to Maple Hollow's past, unburdened by the biases that had clouded the investigation for years. Her interest piqued by the whispers of renewed interest in Emily's case, Sarah had taken it upon herself to review the original files. It was during one of these late-night sessions that she stumbled upon something extraordinary, a piece of evidence that had been overlooked, tucked away in a dusty archive. A single strand of hair, meticulously preserved, yet never analyzed with the advancements of modern technology. With genetic genealogy now at her disposal, Sarah saw an opportunity. The technology could trace familial connections, potentially identifying someone who had slipped through the cracks all those years ago. She wasted no time in sending the sample to the lab, knowing that it could be the key to unlocking the mystery that had haunted the town for so long. Meanwhile, the Masons, buoyed by the news of Sarah's involvement, found themselves cautiously hopeful for the first time in years. At the local diner, conversations grew more animated, speculation rife about who might have been missed, who had secrets still to hide. Names were whispered with a mix of fear and curiosity, and the weight of old suspicions settled heavily on their shoulders. One evening, as the sun set over Maple Hollow, casting long shadows across the town, Sarah received a call from the lab. Her heartbeat quickened as she listened, scribbling notes furiously. The results were in, and they pointed to a familial match, someone who had never been on the police radar before. The town, still reeling from the initial shock of the case's reopening, now buzzed with the electricity of impending revelation. Who among them was connected to this new thread of evidence, and why had they remained hidden for so long? As Sarah prepared to confront the individual linked by the genetic trail, she knew that she was stepping into a minefield. The truth she sought could unravel lives, destroy reputations, and bring long-buried secrets to light. But it was a risk she was willing to take, driven by a fierce commitment to justice and the hope of giving the Masons the closure they so desperately needed. With the town on edge and the Masons holding their breath, Sarah set out, armed with the knowledge that this discovery could finally answer the question that had haunted so many for so long. What really happened to Emily Mason on that fateful night? As she drove through the quiet streets, the magnitude of what lay ahead weighed heavily on her. But in that moment, she knew that the silence of Maple Hollow was about to be shattered, and the truth, at long last, was within reach. Sarah's car cut through the stillness of the evening, the hum of the engine a soft undercurrent to her racing thoughts. Her destination was a modest house on the outskirts of town, its lights dim against the encroaching darkness. Inside lived the person linked by the newfound genetic evidence, an unexpected name that had emerged from the shadows of the past. The door opened to reveal a man in his late 50s, his eyes a mirror of surprise and apprehension. He had lived in Maple Hollow his entire life, known to most as a quiet, unassuming figure, never one to attract attention. Yet here he stood, at the center of a storm he never saw coming. Sarah introduced herself, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. She explained the purpose of her visit, the breakthrough in the case, and the reason his name had surfaced. His reaction was subtle, a flicker of something that could have been shock or perhaps recognition. He invited her in, his movements slow as if each step took him closer to a place he feared to tread. As they spoke, it became clear that he had secrets, ones that had long been buried under the guise of normalcy. He admitted to knowing Emily Mason, their paths having crossed years before, but claimed innocence in her disappearance. Yet, the evidence suggested a connection too significant to dismiss. Sarah pressed gently, her questions a delicate dance around the truth. His responses were measured, guarded, as if he was treading a fine line between self-preservation and revelation. It was then, in the midst of their conversation, that he paused, his gaze drifting to the window where the night pressed close, the weight of the years palpable in the silence that stretched between them. There was something he needed to tell her, he finally confessed, his voice a whisper that barely broke the tension. It was a piece of information he had carried for years, a burden that had grown heavier with time. He spoke of a night long ago, a gathering of friends, and a secret that had bound them together in a pact of silence. Sarah listened intently, her mind racing to connect the dots. This new thread, while tenuous, was a glimmer of hope, a path that could lead to the truth. As she left the house, her thoughts were a whirlwind of possibilities and questions, each more urgent than the last. Back in town, the buzz of speculation grew louder. The revelation of a familial link had ignited a firestorm of curiosity and fear. People whispered in hushed tones, their eyes darting with suspicion, as if the truth might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. As Sarah returned to her office, she knew the next steps were critical. The information she had gathered needed to be verified, the connections explored further. Yet in the heart of Maple Hollow, where secrets had long been the currency of silence, the path to justice was fraught with danger and uncertainty. But Sarah was undeterred. With each passing moment, the picture became clearer, each piece of the puzzle sliding into place. The truth was within reach, and with it, the chance to finally bring peace to the Masons and to the town that had been haunted for far too long. As she sat at her desk, the weight of the case heavy on her shoulders, She knew that the next few days would be decisive. The journey to uncover the truth was far from over, but for the first time in years, there was hope, a beacon in the darkness, guiding her forward. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles like a blanket over a town that has grown weary from secrets. In her office, Sarah stared at the array of documents scattered across her desk, each one a fragment of the past waiting to be pieced together. She knew she needed help, someone with fresh eyes and unyielding resolve, someone who could see beyond the fog of history and bring new energy to the investigation. The following morning, a new name entered the fray. Detective Mark Ellison, a recent addition to the local police department, renowned for his innovative approach to solving cold cases. His reputation for persistence and an uncanny ability to connect seemingly disparate dots had preceded him. Sarah had heard whispers of his work in neighboring towns, where he had used the latest advancements in forensic technology to crack cases long thought unsolvable. Their meeting was brief but charged with purpose. Mark, with his keen eyes and a demeanor that exuded quiet confidence, listened intently as Sarah recounted what she had uncovered. The mention of a possible familial link, a hidden secret among friends, piqued his interest. He nodded thoughtfully, already formulating a plan to breathe new life into the stagnant investigation. Days later, at a conference room table cluttered with files and photographs, Mark introduced an idea that could change everything: genetic genealogy. This cutting-edge technology had revolutionized the field of forensic science, allowing investigators to trace family trees and identify suspects through distant relatives. It was a controversial tool, but one that had already seen success in other high-profile cases. Sarah felt a rush of optimism, a sensation both foreign and exhilarating. With Mark's guidance, they could re-examine the evidence, apply this new method, and perhaps finally unearth the truth hidden in the tangled web of Maple Hollow's history. As they delved deeper, Mark requested the original DNA samples collected from the scene, evidence that had lain dormant in evidence lockers for years, untouched and unexamined by this new scientific lens. The process would be meticulous and time-consuming, but the potential rewards were immense. Meanwhile, the town buzzed with renewed anticipation. Rumors of a breakthrough circulated like wildfire, igniting hope and anxiety in equal measure. Families whispered of long-buried memories, and old friends exchanged wary glances, each wondering what secrets might soon be exposed. In the midst of this whirlwind, Sarah and Mark worked tirelessly, piecing together the genetic puzzle that could lead them to a killer who had walked among them, hidden in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. As the sun set on another day of grueling investigation, a call came in. A match had been found. The results were preliminary, but the implications were staggering. A newfound energy surged through Sarah as she realized they were on the brink of a breakthrough that could finally bring answers to the Masons and a community that had waited too long for justice. But as they prepared to confront the shadows of the past, the question loomed: would this lead to the truth or uncover more secrets meant to remain hidden? The chase was on, and the stakes had never been higher. The lab was silent, save for the low hum of machinery processing the DNA data. Sarah sat, her eyes glued to the computer screen, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. Mark stood nearby, a silent sentinel, sharing in her anticipation. The match was not yet a certainty, but it was the closest they'd ever been. As the machine worked, Sarah reflected on the weight of the moment. For so long, the identity of the killer had been a phantom, a shadow cast over Maple Hollow. Now, with each passing second, that shadow was being pulled into the light. Mark broke the tension with a quiet, steady voice. This technology, he explained, worked by identifying genetic markers that linked the DNA from the crime scene to a family tree. It was the modern-day equivalent of finding a needle in a haystack, but with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. They were analyzing the data through a burgeoning database of consumer genetics, a controversial practice to be sure, but one that had solved cases previously deemed unsolvable. Each genetic clue was like a breadcrumb leading them closer to the truth. Then a beep. The results had arrived, and with them, a name. It was a distant cousin, a relative of the suspect. Mark's eyes met Sarah's, a silent communication passing between them. They were one step closer, but the work was far from over. The ensuing days were a blur of activity. Interviews were conducted with familial matches, each conversation revealing a little more of the puzzle. Old family secrets were unearthed, stories of estrangement and hidden pasts emerged like ghosts from the shadows. The town, once buzzing with anticipation, now held its collective breath. Who among them, they wondered, could be linked to such a heinous crime? The Masons, still hopeful yet wary of false leads, watched the investigation unfold with a mixture of hope and fear. And then, the final piece. A name emerged from the genetic tapestry, a name that had been there all along, woven into the fabric of the town. It was someone familiar, yet unexpected, a respected member of the community, known to many, yet truly known by none. Sarah and Mark exchanged a look of disbelief. The revelation was staggering, the implications profound. This was the killer in plain sight, the person who had evaded justice for years, living openly among those he had deceived. The town's anticipation turned to shock as whispers spread. This was not just a resolution to the case, it was a seismic shift in their understanding of their own lives and histories. As Sarah and Mark prepared for the next steps, the weight of their discovery settled heavily upon them. They had uncovered the truth, yet with it came the burden of revelation. What they had found would change everything. Would the town accept this new reality? Could justice finally be served, or would the past's dark secrets continue to haunt them? The answers lay just ahead, hidden within the unraveling threads of Maple Hollow's tangled history. The investigation room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Sarah and Mark sat across from the forensic analyst, who had just confirmed what they had feared. The DNA evidence was conclusive. The name that had emerged from the genetic data was not an outsider, but someone deeply embedded in the community. Their minds raced as they grappled with the implications. The analyst leaned forward, voice steady but laced with urgency. "We've traced the DNA to David Langston. He's a prominent figure in Maple Hollow, known for his charitable work and long-standing service on the town council. His DNA matched the sample found at the crime scene, leaving no doubt that he is connected to the crime." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she absorbed the information. "David Langston," she repeated almost in disbelief. "He's been a pillar of this community for decades. How could he have hidden this for so long?" Mark nodded, his expression a mix of determination and disbelief. "It's always the ones you least expect. We need to proceed carefully. This revelation will shake the town to its core." They wasted no time. A warrant was swiftly secured, and a plan was devised to bring Langston in for questioning. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them, as they prepared to confront a man whose public persona was the antithesis of a murderer. As they approached Langston's home, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the quiet street. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. The town was on edge, and the presence of police vehicles only heightened the tension. Inside, Langston sat in his study, unaware of the storm about to descend. His life, meticulously constructed over years, was moments away from unraveling. As the doorbell rang, he looked up, sensing the shift in the air, the change that would soon consume his world. The officers entered, their demeanor professional but firm. "Mr. Langston, we have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 2004 murder case," one stated, his voice unwavering despite the enormity of the accusation. Langston's face remained composed, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps, or the realization that his secrets were no longer safe. The room seemed to hold its breath as the reality of the situation set in. Langston, the man who had once been the town's moral compass, was now at the center of its darkest hour. As they escorted him out, whispers spread like wildfire. The town, once unified in its pursuit of justice, was now fractured by the revelation that one of their own had betrayed them all. Back at the station, Sarah and Mark prepared for the interrogation. They knew this was their chance to unravel the full story, to understand how a man like Langston could commit such a crime and evade justice for so long. The weight of their responsibility was clear. They had to extract the truth, not just for the family who had suffered for so many years, but for a community in desperate need of answers. The door to the interrogation room closed behind them, sealing them in a space where secrets would be laid bare, and the past would finally be confronted. As they faced Langston, they knew the most critical phase of their investigation had only just begun. Would Langston confess, or would he continue to weave a web of deception? The truth lay just beyond, shrouded in layers of denial and deceit, waiting to be uncovered. The interrogation room was stark, almost sterile, the kind of place designed to strip away any facade. Langston sat across from Sarah and Mark, his posture relaxed, but his eyes darting, calculating. The air was thick with tension, a palpable anticipation of what was to come. Sarah leaned forward, her voice steady, yet probing. "Mr. Langston, for years we've been piecing together the events of that fateful night in 2004. You've been at the heart of this town, but the evidence tells a different story. It's time to set things right." Langston's lips pressed into a thin line, his silence speaking volumes. Mark, sensing the need to break the impasse, slid a folder across the table. Inside lay the culmination of years of relentless investigation, new forensic data, re-examined evidence, and a breakthrough that had led them to this moment. "We've reanalyzed the DNA," Mark explained, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Technological advancements have allowed us to extract more information than ever before. The DNA found at the scene, once inconclusive, now matches yours with near certainty." Langston's facade cracked just slightly, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. But it wasn't enough to deter Mark, who pressed on. "We also have new testimony, someone who saw you that night near the scene. They've come forward after all these years, willing to tell the truth." Sarah's eyes never left Langston's, searching for any sign of remorse or fear. "You were seen leaving the vicinity of the victim's home, Mr. Langston. You were the last person to see her alive." The room fell silent, the only sound the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Langston finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You think this will hold up? DNA can be planted, witnesses can lie." Mark leaned back, undeterred by the deflection. "Perhaps, but what about the financial records? We found discrepancies in your accounts that suggest a motive, something you've carefully hidden until now." Langston's composure faltered, his eyes narrowing. It was as if he was weighing his options, the balance of power slowly shifting. The walls he had built around his life were crumbling, and for the first time he seemed to truly grasp the gravity of his situation. Sarah leaned in once more, her voice softening, almost empathetic. "It's time to face the truth, Mr. Langston. For her family, for this town, and for yourself." The silence stretched, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. Langston's gaze fell, his facade slipping away. The room held its breath, waiting for the confession that would bring closure to years of unanswered questions. But would he finally admit to his deeds, or would he continue to hide behind a veil of lies? The tension was electric, the outcome uncertain. As the seconds ticked by, the truth seemed both imminent and elusive, a heartbeat away from revelation. What would Langston choose? Would justice prevail, or would the darkness of his secrets continue to shroud the town in mystery? Langston's voice cracked, a fissure in the armor of his carefully constructed life. "I didn't mean for it to happen." His words hung in the air, a reluctant admission that sent a shiver through the room. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his, urging him to continue. "What happened that night, Mr. Langston? Why did it come to this?" Langston's eyes were distant, as if seeing the events unfold anew. "She knew things about my business. I thought I could convince her to stay quiet." His voice trembled, the weight of his confession pressing down on him. But she wouldn't listen. She was going to ruin everything I'd built. Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. For years, Langston had been the town's financial advisor, a man of integrity and trust. But beneath the veneer of respectability lay a web of deceit and desperation. Langston's public persona was impeccable. He chaired charity events, mentored local youth, and was a regular at Sunday services. To the townspeople, he was a paragon of virtue. But in the shadows, he lived a double life, embezzling funds to support a failing business venture, hoping no one would notice the discrepancies. "You thought you could control the narrative," Mark said, his voice steady, "but she threatened to expose you." Langston nodded, his face ashen. "I tried to scare her into silence, but it got out of hand. I didn't mean for—" His voice broke, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. Sarah's tone was gentle but firm. "You've carried this burden for years, Mr. Langston. It's time to stop running from the truth. Langston's eyes were wet now, tears he'd fought to suppress finally breaking free. I didn't want this. I never wanted this. Mark stood, the gravity of Langston's confession settling in. The final steps of justice were now in motion. With a heavy heart, he recited the words that would signal the end of Langston's charade. You're under arrest for the murder of Emily Caldwell. The room seemed to hold its breath, the enormity of the revelation echoing through the silence. Outside, a town waited. The news of Langston's arrest set to rip through the community like a shockwave, challenging everything they thought they knew about one of their own. As Langston was led away, Sarah and Mark exchanged a look, a shared understanding of the bittersweet victory. The case that had haunted them for years was finally nearing its end. But with the truth came the unveiling of a painful reality. A trusted figure had betrayed them all. The streets outside were eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the uproar that would soon follow. Langston's arrest would send ripples through the community, shattering illusions and forcing everyone to reevaluate the stories they'd accepted without question. In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town. The darkness of night enveloped the streets, but with the dawn would come a new day, a chance for healing and perhaps a semblance of peace for those left in the wake of Langston's betrayal. But for now, the air was thick with the weight of revelations, each moment a step closer to closure. Yet as they stood on the precipice of justice, one question still lingered. How would the town rebuild from the ashes of this newfound truth? The sun rose on the sleepy town of Maplewood with a renewed sense of unease. Whispers spread like wildfire as the news of Langston's arrest reached every corner, every household. It seemed impossible. A man they had known, trusted, even loved, was now the face of the darkness that had haunted them for so long. Inside the sterile walls of the interrogation room, Langston sat slumped, his hands cuffed in front of him. The weight of his actions bore down heavily. Across from him, Detective Sarah Mitchell leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. The room was silent, the air charged with the gravity of what was to come. "Tell us how it happened, Langston. Tell us why." Langston's voice was a mere whisper, cracking under the strain of years spent hiding a monstrous secret. It was an accident at first. "Emily, she saw something she shouldn't have. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." His words tumbled out, each one a piece of the puzzle that had confounded investigators for nearly 2 decades. As he recounted the events of that fateful night, the room seemed to shrink around him. He spoke of fear and anger, of mistakes that spiraled out of control. But beneath it all was a thread of regret, a sorrow so deep it threatened to consume him. Hours passed, the confession unfolding in painful detail. Outside, the town braced itself, grappling with the duality of betrayal and relief. The truth was out, but the path to healing was only just beginning. In the courtroom, the trial that followed was swift but thorough. Evidence meticulously gathered over the years was presented, each piece a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice. The community watched, eyes wide with a mix of horror and disbelief as Langston faced his judgment. The verdict was inevitable, guilty on all counts. As the judge pronounced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, a collective exhale seemed to ripple through the room. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. But for Emily Caldwell's family, the verdict brought only a semblance of peace. Her mother, now frail with age, clutched a photograph of Emily, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Her father, stoic as ever, turned to the crowd, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "We may never understand why this happened, but we must find a way to move forward. Emily's memory deserves that much. The town of Maplewood, too, faced a long road to recovery. Trust, once shattered, takes time to rebuild." Neighbors eyed each other with renewed suspicion, a reminder of the secrets that had festered beneath their very noses. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there was hope. The case had brought the community together, uniting them in their shared grief and determination to prevent such tragedies from ever happening again. As the dust settled, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey. The sleepless nights, the dead ends, the relentless pursuit of a truth that seemed forever out of reach. She realized that justice was not just about punishment, but about honoring the victim's memory, about bringing light to the darkest of places. In the end, as the sun dipped once more below the horizon, The town of Maplewood stood resilient. Emily Caldwell's story would not be forgotten. It would serve as a beacon, a reminder of the strength that lies in community, in truth, and in the unyielding pursuit of justice. And so, with the case now closed, the town looked towards the future, determined to rebuild and heal, their hearts forever scarred, yet hopeful for the dawn of a new day.